What if I told you there's a lesson from Jesus that's completely vanished from churches? A truth so powerful, it would change everything you think about spirituality. But before you dismiss this as another conspiracy theory, prepare to discover something that's been right in front of you all along. Because what I'm about to reveal doesn't come from lost apocryphal texts. It's not hidden in ancient scrolls. The lost lesson of Jesus has always been in. But what if I told you something much deeper was happening there? Jesus wasn't just praying, teaching the most important lesson of all. A lesson that would transform humanity if understood, but which was completely lost when religion became institutionalized. The lost lesson of Jesus is about presence, pure presence, awakened consciousness, the transformative power of the present moment. Know what you're thinking? Present moment? That sounds very modern, very new age, very Eckhart Tolle. But here's what will blow your mind. Eckhart Tolle didn't invent anything new. He simply rediscovered what Jesus always taught. The difference is, he saw through the veil that obscured this truth for 2,000 years. Let me show you something. The Gospels. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't talking about a place. No, he was talking about a state of consciousness, a state that only exists in the present, here, now, in this very moment. Think about it. The original Greek word is entos, which literally means within, not later, not up there, within, in the space of your own awakened consciousness. Jesus was saying that the paradise you seek already exists, not as something you achieve, but as something you recognize when you stop looking in the wrong places. But the church turned this into a future promise, a reward after death, a distant place you only reach by being good enough. That, the most powerful lesson of Jesus, simply vanished. You know why Jesus healed instantaneously? Yeah. Why his miracles happened the exact moment he touched someone? Because Jesus lived in total presence. He wasn't lost in thoughts about the past. He wasn't anxious about the future. He was completely present. And in that presence, everything became possible. Do you know what happens when you are truly present? Time slows down. Perception expands. You can feel the vital energy flowing through you and around you. It's as if a new dimension of reality opens up. Tolle describes this as the inner energetic field of the body. Jesus called it abundant life. But they're talking about the same experience, the experience of being completely alive, completely awake, completely here. But here's where it gets even deeper. Jesus didn't keep this secret to himself. He tried to teach this to his disciples, constantly. Remember when he said, "Do not worry about tomorrow." It wasn't just motivational advice. It was a direct instruction on how to live in conscious presence. Technique of spiritual awakening. Consider the lilies of the field. It wasn't poetry. It was a mindfulness exercise. Jesus was teaching his disciples to get out of their minds and into the present through conscious observation. But the disciples couldn't understand. They were trapped in the same mental trap we all know. Trap of psychological time, living in the past, projecting the future, completely missing the only moment where life truly happens. Present moment. Jesus knew this. He knew he was trying to convey something the human mind can't easily grasp. Why he spoke in parables. Why he used metaphors. He was trying to awaken something beyond intellectual understanding. Want to know where this becomes clearest? In the last sentence Jesus uttered on the cross. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Most people interpret this as a death prayer, but in reality, it was the final example of the lost lesson. Jesus was demonstrating total surrender to the present moment, the complete acceptance of what is, abandonment of all resistance to what was happening. Teaching that true spirituality doesn't happen by escaping the present moment. It happens by completely immersing yourself in it, even when that moment is difficult, even when that moment is painful, even when that moment is death. And that, my friend, is something no church teaches you, because teaching conscious presence means teaching people to find God within themselves. Silence of the mind, peace of the present moment, without intermediaries, without institutions, without external control. But wait, because there's something even more impressive I need to show you. You remember the Transfiguration? When Jesus took Peter, James, and John to the mountain, and suddenly his face began to shine like the sun, his clothes became white as light, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son." The traditional explanation is miraculous, supernatural, something only Jesus could do because he was the Son of God. But what if I told you that the Transfiguration is something that can happen to any human being in a state of absolute presence? Eckhart Tolle describes exactly this: moments where presence becomes so intense that the vital energy itself becomes visible, where awakened consciousness shines through the physical body. He calls it a body of light, not as a metaphor, but as a real experience. People around the world report similar experiences during deep states of meditation or presence. Moments where they feel they are literally glowing from the inside out, where the separation between inner and outer disappears completely. Jesus wasn't showing off his special divinity. He was demonstrating the potential for awakening that exists within every human being. He was revealing what happens when someone lives in total presence. What happens when individual consciousness dissolves into universal consciousness. But the disciples were afraid. They couldn't process what they were seeing. Exactly as happens to us when we experience moments of deep presence. The mind panics, tries to explain, tries to categorize, tries to control. Peter, poor Peter, he suggested building 3 tents because the mind always wants to do something with spiritual experience. Transform it into a ritual, a ceremony, something it can control and repeat. Jesus knew that the state of presence cannot be imprisoned in mental structures. It can only be lived. This is where the lost lesson connects directly with what Eckhart Tolle rediscovered 2,000 years later. Tolle realized that behind all thoughts, behind all emotions, behind all mental activity, there is a conscious presence observing it all. Consciousness untouched by the drama of the... Jesus called this the kingdom of heaven. Tolle calls it presence, but they're talking about exactly the same thing. Space of pure consciousness that exists before thoughts arise. The silence that is always present behind the mental noise. Peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. And when you begin to live from this space, miracles become natural. Not because you've gained supernatural powers, but because you've stopped resisting the flow of life. You've stopped fighting against the present moment. You've become a channel for something much bigger than the limited personality you thought you were. Jesus lived permanently in this state. That's why he said, "I and the Father are one." He wasn't claiming a special position in the cosmic hierarchy. He was describing what happens when individual consciousness dissolves into universal consciousness. And that's exactly what Tolle teaches when he talks about the dissolution of the ego in the present moment. But do you want to know why this lesson disappeared from the scriptures? Because it's too dangerous for power structures. A person living in conscious presence doesn't need external saviors, doesn't need spiritual intermediaries, doesn't need systems of religious control. An awakened person encounters God directly, in the silence of their own being, in the peace of the present moment, in the presence that is their own deepest essence. And that scares any institution that depends on the spiritual dependence of people. That's why the lost lesson was transformed into future doctrines, into promises of salvation after death, into complex belief systems that keep people searching outside for what has always been within. But now the veil is beginning to lift again. People like Eckhart Tolle are rediscovering what Jesus always knew. And gradually, the world is waking up to the truth that was lost. But here, I need to tell you something that will connect all the dots in a way you never imagined. Tolle spent years suffering from severe depression and anxiety, until one night, at 29, something happened. He had what he calls a spiritual awakening. Suddenly, all mental activity stopped, and he found himself in a state of profound peace he had never experienced before. How does he describe this moment? I died that night. What I thought I was simply disappeared. But here's the detail that few realize. Tolle was 29 when this happened. Jesus began his ministry at 30. Coincidence? Maybe not. Maybe there's something about this age range that makes awakening more likely. A saturation of human experience that forces consciousness to seek something beyond mental identification. Does this remind you of anything? If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Jesus wasn't talking about physical sacrifice. He was describing exactly what Tolle experienced: death of the false self, the dissolution of mental identity, the rebirth in present consciousness. And here comes the part that impresses me the most. After this awakening, Tolle spent 2 years practically in silence, sitting on park benches, observing life, without haste, without an agenda, just being. Jesus did 40 days in the desert. Tolle did 2 years in London parks. Both needed a period of integration, a time to adjust to the new reality, to let the old personality dissolve completely and a new way of being emerge. Here's what's absolutely fascinating. After this awakening, Tolle began to teach spontaneously, without studying theology, without formal religious training. People were simply drawn to the presence that emanated from him, exactly as it happened with Jesus. Because when someone lives in true presence, it awakens something in others, something that recognizes this truth, something that knows level that this is our original nature. But wait, the difference between Jesus and Tolle that reveals something even deeper about the lost lesson. Jesus was born in that presence. Tolle had to awaken to it after years of mental suffering. And this shows us something revolutionary about the human condition. We haven't lost our divine nature. We've just forgotten it. Suffering is what eventually forces us to remember. Jesus knew this. That's why he said, "Blessed are those who mourn." Not because suffering is good, but because suffering is what breaks the identification with the mind and forces us to seek something deeper. Tolle describes this perfectly. Sometimes it is necessary that you touch the absolute bottom to discover that, beneath it all, there is an indestructible ground. Jesus called this ground the kingdom of heaven, and he was trying to teach us that we don't need to wait to hit bottom to find it. We can choose to awaken now, in this moment, and how to do it using exactly what Jesus taught, but was lost in translations and interpretations. First, stop looking for God in the future. The kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to after death. It's a state of consciousness available now, this very moment. As Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. It wasn't. It is. Present continuous. Second, practice what Jesus really meant by prayer. He wasn't talking about asking God for things, describing a state of silent communion with the divine presence that you are. When Jesus withdrew to pray, he was entering deep states of conscious presence, connecting with the source, dissolving into infinite consciousness. Tolle calls this being. Jesus called it being with the Father. Third, begin to observe your thoughts without identifying with them. Jesus said, watch and pray. Watching is exactly that, observing mental activity without being dragged along by it. When you can observe your thoughts, you discover that there is something in you that is not thought. Something that is always present, always at peace, always whole. Jesus called it the Father within me. Eckhart Tolle calls it the silent observer. And fourth, and this will change everything in your life, stop resisting the present moment. Jesus demonstrated this even on the cross. Total acceptance of what is. Total surrender to the flow of life. Not passive resignation, but conscious alignment with reality. Tolle teaches the same thing. What is, is. What is not. Simple, profound, transformative. Because when you stop fighting reality, you discover that all your energy was being wasted in resistance. And that released energy becomes pure presence. But now I need to tell you why this understanding is returning, why people like Eckhart Tolle are appearing at this moment in human history. Because we are living what Jesus prophesied, the end times. Not the end of the world, but the end of the mind's dominion over human consciousness. Humanity is waking up collectively. Those who resist this awakening are experiencing more and more suffering. Anxiety, depression, existential emptiness. Look around you. There have never been so many people searching for meaning. Never has there been so much interest in mindfulness, meditation, presence. Never have so many questioned traditional power structures, religious, political, economic. This is no coincidence. It's the collective awakening happening. Human consciousness is evolving, and those who insist on living identified only with the mind are being left behind by life itself, because the old way of living, identified with thoughts and emotions, simply doesn't work anymore in the current energetic frequency of the planet. It's like trying to use an analog phone on a digital network. There's no compatibility. Jesus knew this moment would come. That's why he said he would return. But he wasn't talking about a physical second coming. He was talking about the awakening of the Christic consciousness within humanity. And this consciousness is pure presence. It is the kingdom of heaven manifesting through millions of human beings simultaneously. Eckhart Tolle is merely serving as one of the channels for this ancient wisdom to return. But he's not the only one. There are thousands of people around the world rediscovering this truth, each with their own language. each with their own approach, but all talking about the same thing Jesus always taught: the transformative power of the present moment. Now let me show you how you can start applying this in your life today. The first thing you need to understand is that presence is not a state you reach once and for all. Something you cultivate, moment by moment, breath by breath. Jesus knew this. That's why he said to pray constantly, not to repeat words constantly, but to remain constantly connected with the presence. Start simple. Several times a day, pause. Consciously breathe 3 times and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What am I experiencing at this moment? Don't judge. Don't try to change. Just observe. This is presence in action. This is what Jesus did when he withdrew to pray. He wasn't reciting words, space of conscious observation, connecting with life happening within him. And here's what's fascinating. The more you do this, the more you realize that there's a natural peace always present behind all thoughts and emotions. Stillness that doesn't depend on anything external. It's like discovering that your house has a secret room you never noticed. A place of absolute silence that has always been there. Second, when you find yourself lost in thoughts about the past or worries about the future, remember Jesus' words, "Do not worry about tomorrow." He wasn't being naive. He was pointing to where life really happens. Bring your attention back to your body. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the air entering and leaving your lungs. Feel the weight of your clothes on your skin. Connect with life happening in you, because here's the secret. Your mind can travel through time. It can review the past endlessly. It can project 1,000 possible futures, but your body only exists in the present. And when you connect with your body, you automatically come home to the only moment where peace is possible. And third, practice radical acceptance of what is happening. This doesn't mean liking everything. It means stopping wasting energy fighting reality. As Jesus taught by example, "Thy will be done," not as blind submission, but as conscious alignment with the flow of life. Because here is the truth that the lost lesson reveals. You're not a victim of circumstances. You are not a sinner who needs to be saved by external forces. You are not small, limited, or separated from God. You are infinite consciousness, temporarily focused on a human experience. You are the kingdom of heaven manifested in form. You are, as Jesus said, the light of the world. But you forgot. The mind convinced you that you are only the thoughts that go through your head, the emotions you feel, the circumstances you experience. The lost lesson of Jesus is the reminder that you are much more than that. You are the conscious presence that observes all this. You are the space in which all experience happens. And when you begin to live from this understanding, everything changes. Relationships become more authentic. Work becomes more fluid. Challenges become opportunities for growth. Life becomes a sacred experience. Not because circumstances always become perfect, because you find peace that is independent of circumstances, peace that Jesus promised, the peace that Eckhart Tolle rediscovered, the peace that has always been your deepest nature. And now the veil has completely lifted. See, the lost lesson never really disappeared. It just waited for the right time to be understood again. Jesus planted the seeds. Eckhart Tolle is helping to harvest them. But you are the one who needs to allow them to bloom in your own life. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how many spiritual masters talk about presence. It doesn't matter how many books are written about awakening. It doesn't matter How many revelations are shared about the lost lessons of Jesus? What matters is whether you will choose to awaken, now, at this moment, to the truth that has always lived within you. Here's what's liberating. You don't need to become enlightened. You don't need to have extraordinary mystical experiences. You don't need to abandon your life and retreat to a monastery. You don't need to become a monk. You just need to begin. One present moment at a time. One mindful breath at a time. One non-judgmental observation at a time. Jesus started as a carpenter. Eckhart Tolle began as a profoundly depressed man. Enlightenment isn't a prize for the perfect. It's a discovery available to anyone who stops searching outside for what has always been within. Truth is, you've never been separate from the divine. You've never needed saving from anyone. You've never been anything less than perfect in your deepest essence. You simply forgot. And the entire spiritual journey is about remembering, about discovering that what you seek is already what you are. Jesus knew this. Eckhart Tolle rediscovered it. And now it's your turn. The veil has been lifted. The lost lesson has been revealed. The rest is up to you.